So I got the Flemings. That's two points that Pete didn't hit on, and then I could draw from a hat.
Yeah, Ian
Right.
Fleming, the James Bond author. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
oh, by the way, hello everybody. I'm Chris McMillan with
Oh,
Autonomy.
did you start? There you go.
I'm Chris McMillan here with Autonomy Season 1. I'm here with Richard Grove, tragedyandhope.com. This is just a quick update for everyone about what's been going on with Richard. Richard, you've just done a really very intriguing interview with Pete Raymond, better known as Nance Raider, Free Man Behind the Wall. The interview, when will it be out? Will it be released pretty soon, you said?
You know, it's it's interesting because I'm pretty sure Pete released it last Friday,
Okay.
but I haven't checked. He didn't send, so I assumed it was out there, and I think I just posted it to Patreon earlier today. Is what's scheduled for release, and it's maybe an hour long. But he had some insightful questions about my Rothschild project and the book that I'm writing, or it's two books, it's like two volumes at this point. And but there was still a lot left on the table, and I had at least a sample of the document here on the desk. So we cover complementary angles, so as not to be redundant with anything he asked. So if you ask me something that he's already posed a question, I'll just say check out that interview, and I'll post it there after we're done with this. I'll post it in the community, and I
Discussing
think what do you
the
want to talk about?
well, it's fascinating. I did not know there's a connection between the Rothschilds and the Flemings. Ian Fleming, the author of James Bond. What's going on with that?
Well, it's interesting because when I looked at Ian Fleming, it was from a World War II British intelligence embedded in America before America got into the war. So from like 1938 on, British Security Coordination, BSC, as it was called, had set up in America in Rockefeller Center, and that was the headquarters. But they also had envoys, ambassadors, other spies in Washington, D.C. And Ian Fleming was one of these spies. Roald Dahl, who also wrote a children's book, was one of these spies. So Roald Dahl, he wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Ian Fleming, I believe, wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And yet they were spies during World War II for the British in America. Right? They weren't spying on Germany. They're spying in America to influence Americans not to support Germany. And Ian Fleming, he had attended an assassination camp called Camp X, which was an Anglo-American camp right on the other side of the American-Canadian border, located in Canada. So he's an interesting character, and there's a lot to that. A lot of books I read about the intelligence community that he worked in, because he worked for MI6 and he helped to draw up the blueprints for the CIA. That wasn't, So the British were really behind a lot of the intelligence apparati would be the plural, of America. So I thought that was interesting. And Ian Fleming has a brother named Valentine Fleming. Wait. His brother might be named Peter, and his dad was Valentine Fleming. Also an interesting character. And then you start to catch on that they're in the upper crust, as Ray McGovern would state it. They're in the upper crust of British society. So then I asked the question, where did that family get its wealth? And you get back to Robert Fleming and Company. The modern day bank was called Fleming's. And Fleming's recently did a deal with this company called, it was formerly Jardine Matheson. So Jardine is an opium monopoly company that was set up during the British Opium Wars and their monopoly through the East India Company. Jardine Matheson was a Scottish company that was like instrumental in making sure that the opium monopoly continued. So in recent years, Fleming's to subjugate populations like China and India. And it also played into the American textile trade. So then I asked the question, at this point, the Flemings are robber barons. They helped to fund a whole bunch of railroads. They had investments in America. And so understanding where they were in the echelons of power and the roles that they were playing, I then asked the question, well, how do the Rothschilds, if at all, tie in? Because they can't be too far from the structure because they're playing within the infrastructure that the Rothschild banking dynasty had created. So then I was like, well, have the Rothschilds been involved with the opium trade? Because their rise on a chart looks very similar to the rise of the East India Company and its opium trade. And you look for this evidence that people claim on the internet, and that's not something you want to hang your hat on. But what you can discover is that in 1824, the Rothschilds created a company called the Alliance Assurance Company, ALLIANCE ASSURANCE company. The Alliance Assurance Company was an insurance company that covered all these ships merchanting opium. So they didn't like own the ships necessarily or own the captains or the crew. They just did the insurance on the whole. And so then you start tracking Alliance Assurance Company through the 1820s, the 1830s, the 1840s, 1850s. And they're opening up offices all along the opium route, including Canton, which was to become Hong Kong. And so as far as them being, so they're all tied together. They're all making their money from the opium trade at that time. And that wasn't the only Rothschild industry. I mean, they're involved with mining and statecraft and colonizing and a whole bunch of other things. It's a very fascinating history. But specifically, the robber barons like the Flemings were instrumental, and yet they weren't known. So by the time Ian Fleming comes around, we don't think of him as the grandson, the billionaire scion family of, a banking family. But that's where he was coming from to get in the position he was at. And then you roll forward from that and see that the Flemings Bank is still doing business with Jardine Matheson today. And that, like other companies like HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation, was another creation of the opium trade and the opium monopoly back then. And it still exists today and still launders drug money and does so without any kind of punishment. So the Flemings are just one small piece in the puzzle, but I include them in the Rothschild book under the topic heading of various robber barons and their relationships with the Rothschilds.
It's incredible.
A deep enough answer? Because I could go deeper for you if you want.
Well, we want to save a little bit for the book, don't we? It's incredible,
Sure.
The fact that then he went on, the world will know Ian Fleming as the James Bond writer. So that way.
Hey, did we lose your video, or we're looking at your desktop? You eating? Is that a picture of your dinner?
That probably, if you're seeing my desktop, that would be some snails that I once ate.
Yeah, snails and bread. Yeah. Did we lose your video because of your connection or something?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't see you actually, but I can hear you.
Oh, you must have hit screen sharing. I bet you hit screen sharing instead of video at some point.
Let me try. Yeah, nothing's happening. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening there.
At the bottom, there's a green button that says share. I don't know. I was just trying to see if I could get your picture back because.
Okay.
I looked up and I was like, why am I seeing Chris's screen?
Yeah. I was going to ask you the closest book, the book you're working on now. Is there an equivalent book out there right now that kind of sums up and gives an accurate history of the entire Rothschild family? Or do you think, what would be an equivalent of what you're trying to write? Or is there anything out there like it at all?
I mean, the equivalent would be you get the 50 or probably 60 books at this point that I'm surveying and pulling facts together from and showing you where these stories are. So you can go find them if you wanted. So it's basically a map to that which exists about this specific family and their influence in history. It's not my opinion. It's not my feelings. It's not those sort of things. I'm just saying, period by period, 1820s, here are the relevant activities that they were involved in, and here's the references to take you deeper. And most of the references I use are from the Rothschild family archives. So it's like, here's their documents, and it says this, and you can go there and verify it. And so At some point, I would think people were probably interested in finding these things, but no one has the time or inclination to go get all these books, to internalize them, to try to figure out, some of them are obviously propaganda because the family paid for it, like as a favorable, here's a favorable, entertaining picture, right? It's like a portrait on paper.
Yeah.
So when they're commissioning those portraits, I'm sure they will, not have the double chin or the crossed eye or whatever, like the imperfections, right, aren't going to be captured necessarily.
Well,
So you can get a 2-volume set. The Rothschilds, Money's Profits, and I forget what the second volume is called, by Neil Ferguson, and it's spelled Niall, Niall Ferguson. He's a professor at Harvard. He's like an authorized biographer of the Rothschilds. He's also done biography of Kissinger. He's a very smart guy, and I agree with him on many points. However, when I read his books, though very, very entertaining, there's instances where he basically, because his writing style is, let him go read all the documents and then tell you the story he learned. Like, to let him go read all the documents and tell you the story he learned from that, and not necessarily tell you where he's getting all that information. So from my perspective, it's hard to tell if it's actual, factual, hyperbolized, exaggerated. So while I would use his books to find out instances and try to find where those things might be, I'd still have to go do a lot of work myself that shouldn't be in a book that's trying to teach you how to actually get your hands on these artifacts and read them for yourself. Right. So what I'm doing is trying to advertise that which exists, which is off of a lot of people's radar, and would add significant amount of perspective. Like it's like going up on a mountain. You could see a lot further. So that's what I'm trying to do.
And that the fact that it'll be so well sourced will be hard for any critics to argue, to make a valid argument, if they go and look at the source.
To make a valid argument, yes, but to criticize it, they're not going to read it. They're just going to be like, this guy's writing about the Rothschilds, so therefore this. And the first thing I said, not the first thing, but in the preface, I basically say that some people claim that the Rothschilds rule the world, and some people claim that the Rothschilds have absolutely no influence, and the truth is somewhere in between. Yeah. And the truth is what you make of it from reading about what they've done over time. And it's not like a good, bad thing. It's just about when you understand like the New York City subway and all these railroads, all this infrastructure, huge infrastructure projects, mining projects, all these other things that are just like off people's radar. And yet they're in the middle of the system created by all these things. Even just coming down to running the Democratic National Committee in the Civil War period, right? Like that was their front man, their authorized business agent in America who was trained at the family bank and sent here. And you can read the letters. Like that's their guy. He's doing their work. He's their front man. So he was in charge of the Democratic National Convention or Committee. That means they're influencing politics in a country that, they're from Europe. They set up a bunch of banks in various parts of Europe, but they struggled with Americans, with the market here.
Richard, I have proof that the Rothschilds care about the planet. I can prove it here. I got this book. It's called The Live Earth Global Warming Survival Handbook by David de Rothschild. Huh? What about that?
They care about the Earth.
About the planet.
I noticed on the cover. Can you hold that cover back up again? I noticed on the cover that there's like a polar bear, and is there a life preserver? What is there imagery on there?
It's an SOS message in a bottle.
Oh, SOS for the polar bear, because they made this whole thing about the polar bears and they have to swim and there's not enough ice. Did you know polar bears can swim like 200 miles? Like they're totally, they're made for it. They do it. So polar bears needing saved. David de Rothschild is not the youngest active generation, but among the youngest active generation of the Rothschild family, the latest progeny, the latest issue that they have put out into the world. And he's basically like the ecological Jesus character who's out there, like, save the planet, save the earth. And I believe it was his uncle, Edmund de Rothschild, in the late 80s, who came up with all these ecological ideas about Agenda 21 and all these other things. So there's multi-generations of the family. They go back hundreds of years. And there's multiple generations of the family at work right now on plans that have been set up for a long time. David the Rothschild's just one of them, but for a time, he was one of the more visible. But yeah, that book, that's a great artifact of history and propaganda.
Yeah. Yeah.
And tying it into pop culture, because that was a concert event, wasn't it? Live Earth?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
right.
Official companion to the Live Earth concerts.
Yeah. So I bet Bono and his Red Foundation and those characters, United Nations, they're all up in there probably. Yeah, it's interesting that, because you have to think about it, like these organizations like UN, that's somebody's corporation. They filed some paperwork someplace, right? But yet we hold it in a high esteem because they meet and they have this semicircular table, conference room type thing, and really high ceilings. Tells you they're important. When they got really high ceilings and some green marble behind the podium, oh wow, it must be really important. But it's just a group of people getting together to say how to, saying that they have the right to tell other people how to live.
Yeah.
And I guess they do, as long as people don't question that obedience. Yeah, I guess they, and it's voluntary. But I think voluntary means some disclosure, and they're not making any type of disclosure. They're telling us a whole bunch, it's a cock and bull story.
I'm really looking forward to this book coming out. Yeah, it's a dangerous philosophy. The idea that
me too. I'm looking forward to it coming out too.
Others,
that's what season 2 of Autonomy is about, because I should theoretically have more time in my schedule and I can just build in time every week. And at some point, I would like to present the book as a course, because that would make it much more educational than just throwing the book over the wall and be like, hey, try to read this. Let's get some people together interested in talking through these subjects, and I'll present part of the book, and then we'll have a Q&A session, right? So that could be a whole course in the not too distant future.
That would be amazing. Yeah, the potential of all the projects coming up, especially in light of what's been going on in Autonomy 1. Now that we're coming to a close, things are happening. The rubber is starting to hit the road for a lot of students. A lot of ideas are becoming reality, and it's very exciting. Very exciting.
Well, what's the most powerful thing that you've gotten from the course, Chris?
Well, I've gotten a lot of powerful things, learned how to manage my time better. And basically I'd like to think I'm being successfully creating a portrait of, like, a little window of what's going on in Autonomy Season 1 with the series of interviews that I've been doing, hopefully for future students to use as a reference, and current students as well, because
but for folks in Strategy and Hope in the community, like all the people in the Autonomy class, they're your cohorts there in the community. Exactly. Now you get to see and hear Tim Flynn instead of just reading them in the chat box. Like, it's a higher level of humanness that we get to exchange and communicate with each other. So I think that's part of if people were in a community and they decided, like, if the course wasn't for them for some reason, or what have you, they were too busy, life comes up, all these things, that's cool. But there are people in the course who are gaining substantial value because they're inputting their own energy, and they're now starting to see serious returns on it. They're starting to see that, if Chris McMillan learns how to get his schedule together and learns a couple technical things, he can start hosting his own interviews and call James Corbett up and get an interview with him, because he knows how to now, and he has the confidence to do so and the focus to get it done and not to mess it up, to get it, the preparation that it takes to get it right, these sort of things.
Yeah, it's been fantastic last few months. And yeah, I would like to think I'm creating, with the interview, it gives a spectrum of, it can give someone an idea of the spectrum of value that is added to the course from the vast extension of skills and talents and variety of the students, because that's where the core value of this class comes in, or is the value that the students themselves add. And there's just so many every field you can think of, every talent, every skill, somebody has something to contribute to the class.
Well, at least anything relevant that we've looked for, we haven't had to go outside the student body to find somebody who knows something extra about that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
one of the main advantages of pulling a bunch of smart people together like that. And I feel like even if I didn't do the course or the Q&A or what have you, just the level of community and relationship that people are establishing on the Discord server is worth the cost of entry that they paid to get into it. Right, that might not be enough to satiate the public price of the course. You need lectures and Q&A and a whole bunch of other stuff for that. But as far as just the value people get out of being able to jump in there, especially once you get to graduate proficiency, you're using the clubhouse. You can talk about whatever you want. You know, you could just you just had a job interview go wrong, or you have a job interview coming up and you want to role play it and get some feedback, or you have a business idea and you want to mastermind it. There's a whole bunch of different things that are very difficult to do on your own the first time without wasting a lot of time and energy to do it, right? So just talking through with some people, like if somebody in the course is considering a purchase, you could talk through with them and try to figure out, what's the best way to do that? What are the options for, how to do that, right? But without these conversations, without community, we're all stuck to try to balance all that. And so it's like load balancing, right? They're not going to take the load off your shoulders, but they'll help you rebalance it so you can carry it easier.
Yeah. That's a good metaphor. Yeah, that's the way it is sometimes. I've reached out to people. I said, look, I need tech skills. I need video editing skills. I'm still learning. Bam, help comes out of the blue right away from every corner with anything. I know
Who'd you find for video editing?
Luis recommended, what is it? I've just downloaded it. And now I can't remember the name of it because I'd never heard it before. But
I didn't know if he recommended somebody else in the course to do video editing. That's kind of what I was getting at, because Tony Myers, he needed some help video editing his trivium lectures that he's been doing on Thursday nights now. He was just trying to do it and he was having difficulty. So I offered to do it, and I'll screen capture it so other people can learn how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And was it Brett Venant hangs out Tuesday nights now? So, a Q&A session with him.
Yeah. So yeah, Brett comes in Tuesday nights. He does like a guest Q&A type thing. Tony teaches on Thursday nights. Michael Badnarik, he's been on there before Tony. So there's a variety of colorful characters purveying knowledge and wisdom and understanding in a very friendly way.
Yeah, it was nice to have Maria Heller on the other week. That was a nice surprise to get her out to chatting with all of us.
Yeah, and that wasn't even intentional. She just figured out how to log into Discord one day, and that happened to be during a Q&A. And then, we don't usually on her show. It's like it's her show, but when it's in autonomy, now she's in our dojo. We get to ask her questions. We found out a lot of things about Maria that we probably don't find out through our interviews, right?
That's true. That's true. Richard, I really appreciate the update. I'm looking forward to getting the Pete Raymond interview, seeing what you've had to say there. That will go out to the Tragedy and Hope community, as well as this update, just to see what you're up to. We'll try and do it again next week. I'll bother you again and say, hey, what's going on?
And now that we talked about it, I should probably post that Q&A from Autonomy week 14 where Maria did that, because that would be interesting for people in the community to hear too.
Yeah, you referring to
get some chuckles out of some of the things she says.
Heller, right?
Yeah, the Maria Heller one. I gotta post that. I'll post that in the community, in the not the think tank. That was 2008 in the history group.
That would be great. Right, Richard, I appreciate it. I won't take up any more of your time tonight. I'll talk to you later, man.
Hey, Chris, thanks for putting a tie on, man. I appreciate it. But I wore question obedience because this is Lord Rothschild on the tortoise.
Got my X-Men tie on tonight.
Right on. All right, and we're doing this next week, right? This is like a weekly thing you're doing with me at 9:00 on Mondays.
Yeah.
Good for you.